Alright, so for our first script, what we want to do is create a big list of planets all in a row there. So they're going to be different sizes, and they're going to have different rotation speeds. So they're going to orbit around the sun like that, and they're each going to do it at a different speed. And they're also going to have different scales like that. So we want them all lined up, different scales, orbiting the sun. So let's hop into our script here. So the first thing we're going to want is an object. So this is what we're going to spawn them as. So let's call this planet prefab. So this will be the base planet that we work from. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, so now we're going to want to create a planet class. So this is going to hold all the information for all the planets. So let's call that planet. Okay, so it's going to need, I think, 2 values. So we're going to have a speed, and we're going to have a object. So the object will be a version of that, the one that's actually in the Uni inspector. And then we're going to want the speed too. So we're going to assign this each time we create a planet, so it'll be different for each planet. Actually, let's call that orbit speed, because we might also have a spin speed later. Okay. So now I'll just get rid of all this and create our first function. So this one is going to pop all the planets in at the beginning of the game. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is worry about that spacing. So it's going to depend partly on the planet's scale, but I think we're also going to want a little buffer. So let's add those 2 in. I think we're going to do ranges for all of these. So it's not just going to be one size, it'll be a min and a max. Okay, and then we're also going to have that buffer. So we'll call that the planet spacing buffer. Okay. So now we want a max distance. So this is how far out everything is going to go. So let's set that as a variable as well. Max, let's do max spacing. Okay. So in here, we are going to need a private float. So that's going to be planet current spacing. So that's basically every time we add another planet, we're going to add to that private variable until we get to the max spacing. So we're going to do a while loop here. Okay, so first we want to bring in the sun. So let's create another game object for that. And we'll call that the sun prefab. Okay, so first things first, we are going to add in our sun. Yeah, so first we need a list of planets though. So let's create that down here. So this is our class list. So we're going to have a list of game objects in the inspector, and then we're also going to have a list of classes here. So that's each one of those game objects is going to be stored inside the class. So that way we can access it and move it around. So we'll call this global planets. Yeah, and we're just going to set that to a new list. Oops. There we go. Okay. So let's instantiate our sun here. So we're going to do So our first planet is going to be an add planet, or let's call it add sun. So we're just setting up our class here with all the different variables. So it's not going to have an orbit speed or anything like that. It's just going to be brought in right at the center. So let's set the object. So planet object equals, then we're actually going to bring it in. So we're going to instantiate it. And we're just going to instantiate that sun prefab. And since it's going at 0, 0, 0, we can just leave it like that. We don't need any other variables. Okay, so let's give that a shot. So now we just need to set up the actual object for that. And we need to run it. So let's bring that into an update function, or a wake function, sorry. So this is just going to run at the beginning of the game. So spawn planets. We can later bring this to a game button. Okay. So in our Unity project, let's create that global game manager object. So this will be in every scene. We'll call this solar system. Doesn't really matter what it's called. And we're going to add our sun on there as a component. Okay, so let's create that sun prefab. So we'll make it a sphere. And let's give it a nice yellow color. Okay, then we'll rename it as well. Let's call that our sun. And, oh, forgot the prefabs folder. So let's create one of those. We'll just drag and drop that in there. Okay. Then we can delete that. And we're just going to set a reference to it here. So now it should have the game object to add. And on awake, it should run the function to instantiate it. Just so we can see that though, let's serialize this. So you can see it in the inspector. So serialized. Whoop. Serializable. Wrong one. There we go. Okay. So let's go back in here and we'll press play. Okay, so it added the sun, and in here, oh, we didn't add it to the list. So let's do that as well real quick. Okay, so we'll do global planets dot add, and we're going to add our sun. So add sun. Let's try that one more time. Okay, so the sun pops up and we can see our first planet. So that should be good for the sun. So next we got to do all the other planets.